I'm just going to point at you. Yeah.
Are you talking before? Or let's go. Okay.
In fact, we can start. Uh-huh. Let me make sure this works. All right. Thank you, Dynamic Trio. And welcome to the Dig Deeper session on the music and visual arts at the church. I just feel so honored and privileged to be here and a little emotional since music is just part of who I am. And I've been here since 2003 and singing in the choir since then. So it's especially moving to me to be able to share this information with you today. And on most days, the sounds of singing or ringing or organ piping drift through our church. And on Sundays, the building just resonates with everything from a Buxtehude, is that how you say his name? Buxtehude organ postlude, to worship songs from Fellowship Hall, to the sweet voices of our children and youth choirs, to the vibrant and moving anthems of the sanctuary choir or covenant bells. Yes, the church is alive with the sound of music. And no matter what the genre, it touches places in the heart that nothing else can reach, and it certainly touches mine. 100 years at Lake Grove, that covers a lot of territory. A wonderful woman named Alberta Fogdahl wrote this, you can tell it's well used, book about the first 50 years of the church. And I've gathered a lot of information from her and from Jane Vogelin from the past. But I've also included today information about that's more contemporary from the year 2000 on, because we don't know if it's going to be another 25 years before we do another one of these, and people might want to know what's happening now. So we'll start with, here we go. We'll start with the fact that originally there weren't choirs in the church services that were held at the community house or for the first years in the new building. Although there were often small groups that sang, which added to the service. It wasn't until the 1940s, under Reverend Lindsay, and he was here from 44 to 50, that music programs strengthened. Let's see if I can get this going here. Yeah. The sanctuary choir was first organized in the 1940s and has been a mainstay ever since. Hey, do you see any faces you recognize in that picture? Oh, look, one. Okay, way to go. Who do you see, Glenn?
Tom Miller, Linda Donica.
Isn't that fun?
George Norman, Burville, Nancy Haskell. A trail, long trail.
Okay, and I didn't plant him either. He just knows that information. Way to go, Glenn. It's fun for me to look at the pictures and I just go, who are these people? Anyway, I will continue on. The very first director of the sanctuary choir was Velma Ull. Are these coming through? Yeah, okay. All right. Anyway, she directed from 1956 to 1968, and she was one amazing lady. And according to the accounts that I read, people just loved her. And she, her music wasn't just her music was not just a part of worship, it was worship, which is, I think, how many of us feel today. In addition to organizing a women's chorus open to all women of the community who enjoyed just singing for the fun and the relaxation of it, she directed the sanctuary choir, she coordinated all the choirs, and she directed any choir that was temporarily missing a director. The choirs increased in number and vitality. participating in choir festivals with other Oswego church choirs. And at one point, our sanctuary choir combined with other church choirs in a music festival in the area where 243 singers raised their voices together. The church was fortunate in having many talented and able people to step in whenever someone was not able to help, like George Cunningham, who worked with the sanctuary choir when Velma was ill for a time, as did Reverend Don Peterson. And just as a quick little aside on Peterson, I guess he had this amazing voice, and he could have studied opera, but he didn't. He went into the ministry, and then he was called to a church down in Los Angeles, and who's in the congregation but Tennessee Ernie Ford? I just thought that was an interesting little aside. Anyway, he worked with the Westminster group, while other talented musicians, including Betty Nowes, is she here today by chance? Well, anyway, Betty, who's going to turn 101 this year, Betty actually stepped in when needed at the time, too. There were others who were either directors of music or directed the sanctuary choir after Velma left, people like Peter Gray, Merlin Grackle, Thomas Miller, Lee Howard, and the church was blessed by their dedication. In 1994, I want to make sure I'm on the right slide. Yeah. In 1994, Anthony Reeves was hired as a full-time director of the entire music program. Sanctuary choir membership increased then under his direction, and because of that, they were able to sing much larger pieces. In 1999, Wendy Belmonte arrived. There she is. Wendy Belmonte arrived. She was named Director of Traditional Music and Coordinator of Music Ministries. And what a blessing that has turned out to be. Here she is in her 25th year of guiding our music program as our Director of Music Ministries and the Sanctuary Choir. And so what I tried to show here in this picture was Wendy, the back, that's what everybody here sees, and then the front, which is what we see, her directing us. Her energy and patience, her desire to have a strive for excellence, and her focus on music that magnifies the message have drawn many to be part of the choir, including me. Under her direction, it has grown from 25 to 95. As an aside, choir member Glenn Haskell, who had all the answers over here a moment ago, has been in the choir for 42 years. And and Larry Bowman for over 50. And then before Elaine Stevens passed away in 2021, she also sang for 50 years. And a note I found in the files in her handwriting, all 5 of her children also sang in the music program at this church. Let's see, let me go on. Okay. Yeah. This is all new to me, so I'm a little slow. Okay, so you can see this is a picture of our wonderful gospel singers, because the music that Wendy covers a wide range of genres, from Handel and Bach, and even more contemporary, Handel and Bach, to gospel favorites, like His Eyes on the Sparrow or Total Praise, and the latter features our talented guest soloists with backup by the choir. And I think a lot of us feel we're giving backup, we're trying our best, right? And you've got these wonderful gospel soloists just living it up, okay? All of the songs are to the glory of God. We even have more contemporary composers like Dan Forrest and Elaine Hagenberg, who also have contributed to the music that we present. And I'm using we because I can't do this with the choir. I have to say we. As the choir has grown, Wendy's been able to select more complex works, and instrumentalists were added, many of whom are part of the Oregon Symphony, and many of you recognize, of course, that Dave has been a part of that. And hopefully you came to, well, a lot of you didn't. Hopefully those of you who didn't sing in the June 1st concert came to the June 1st concert, so you could see what a wonderful opportunity it was to share Elaine Hagenberg's work. COVID didn't stop the choir from singing praises to the Lord. You may remember that music still flowed from the choir and from guest soloists who recorded their pieces at home and to provide music through virtual videos. In addition, the choir also made recordings. Our talented organist, Jeff, made tracks so that we could learn our parts. Then the choir members recorded them from their homes and sent the recordings to Wendy and our AV team to put together in a virtual music video, which were then used on selected Sunday mornings. There we go. The choir made 4 videos in 2020 and 2 in 2021. The moving piece, I Believe, offered on June 7th of 2020, has had over 8,200 views on YouTube. And who can forget the creative way, I don't think I have that set up as best I can, but that's right. Who can forget the creative way that the Hallelujah Chorus was presented, where families were asked to just raise the cards with the words on them? And I wish I could show you the video if you hadn't seen it, because it was just so dynamic. And it was great fun to do, and I think it, I don't know, I think even Handel would have been happy with it. Yeah, it is still on YouTube. And I bet you didn't know that in the summer of 2021, just as the pandemic was kind of waning but still worrisome, that the choir met several times in the parking lot out here. Wendy, who had a broken ankle, directed from the bed of a truck, and Jeff played the electric organ. It was great to sing in person once again. Singing is part of the choir's DNA, and nothing, not even COVID, could keep them from singing on. Also under Wendy's direction, benefit concerts were held to raise money for local missions, like Pink Eraser, Shepherd's Door, and Portland Rescue Mission. And for our World Vision partners, like we did benefit concerts for drought relief in Senegal. We did it for the Makankota School, where we raised money for a classroom. And to date, these concerts have raised over $154,000. Yeah, that deserves some applause. So our mission here, we preach and sing the words to our praises to our God here, and then look what's happened because of that in other countries. In 2005, the choir began music missions to share the gospel through sacred music, to open hearts to God's word, and build relationships founded in Christ's love in other countries, including Belgium, the Netherlands, Austria, Ireland, Italy, and most recently in France and Spain. In this picture, you can see that we were singing on the steps of the Barcelona Cathedral, just as an impromptu concert. And we also did actually programmed concerts, as you see here, at the monastery in Montserrat. And in Montserrat, we actually sang before the boys' choir, which is a world-renowned boys' choir, sang, and there was an audience of almost 600 people there that we could minister to, and it was very, very exciting. And I'll never forget this man who, when Pam was singing Amazing Grace, just lifted himself up and spread his arms out, and that's how people reacted, whether they would do that, or they would be singing along, or you'd see tears coming down their cheeks. So the message, even though we're singing, we sang in a Basque language too, but mostly in English, it still touched their hearts. In 2014, our music ministry began offering free concerts here to open the building's doors to the entire community, sharing both the awe-inspiring space and the rich cadre of musical talent. The result has been a community-based, family-friendly series that has provided an easily accessible concert experience in the heart right here of Lake Oswego. Last year alone, we welcomed over 2,000 people to those concerts. And so they were here and online. Yes, the Sanctuary Choir has been one of the constants since music began at the church, but there have been other groups as well who have added richness to the music program. So let's talk about our children and our youth choirs. There we go. Although at times there were children who sang, and I found a reference to children's choirs from 1933 The organization of graded choirs occurred during Reverend Tolson's ministry, and he was here from 1951 to 55. The names may have changed, but a version of these choirs has been singing since the 50s. Now, I have to go back to Velma Ull, the one that had 9 choirs and did all that stuff, because she directed the Cherub Choir. Sorry. On my screen, it doesn't exactly show what's up there. The Cherub Choir, the Carol Choir, the Miriam and Timothy Choir, the Chancel Choir, the Crusaders, the Westminster Choir. She was a very, very busy lady. And by 1963, there were 215 children in the school program, in the church choirs. The usual schedule was for the Westminster Choir to sing at the early service, the sanctuary at the 11, and the other choirs for special occasions. And here's an interesting story. According to a church member whose name was Evelyn Blodgett, Reverend Tolson didn't approve of parents bringing their children and then waiting for them in the car when they finished Sunday school and taking them home. So he thought if the children were performing, their parents would attend. And it worked. And from this, 3 more choirs were developed. And I honestly can't remember if it was Reverend Tolson or Lindsay who actually got a bus and would go around and pick up kids to come to their choir rehearsals. That's dedication. Speaking of the youngest, the littlest singers were part of a larger children's choir until Let's start again. Speaking of the youngest, the littlest singers were part of the larger choir until 1995, when Julie Strong, who's sitting right over here, volunteered to create the Joy Choir, which is still bringing all of us pure joy when they sing on special Sunday services. Do you see anyone you know? Is that a young Emily Bamonte up there? There she is, Emily, or do you see Sophia Carnesi, or maybe a Daphne Titterington? And if you do the math this fall, it's going to be Julie's 29th year doing this project. And let's give her a little bit of a hand. Let's hear it for Julie. This is a volunteer position, mind you. The first year, Pam Davidson helped her, and then Christina Nichols. More recently, Julie, who has 2 granddaughters that sing in the choir, has co-directed with her own daughter, Mary Bartlett. Yay. Beverly Seifert began as the director of children's choirs and youth in the year 2000. And also, and under her direction and leadership, the choirs grew, and we were inspired by fully costumed cantatas in the spring and at Christmas, as well as Sundays when they were part of the worship services. Bev said that in the 16 years she was here, 452 children and youth went through her program. Now, mind you, some only came once, others stayed for many years, and there was one child who was there for 12 consecutive years. She was followed by Marianne Foy from 2016 to 2022, who continued the tradition of special sacred music productions. And today, as you know, we're blessed to have Abby Crossan, who began, let's give her a round of applause. Let me show you the picture of Amazing Grace, too. I love that picture. Anyway, Abby Crossan, who began as director of children and youth choirs in the summer of 2022. Her Christmas musical was absolutely charming and heartwarming, and who can forget those little lambs in that tender manger scene? And were any of you here yesterday for her presentation of the kids' production? She had a theater and music camp for 1 week, and these kids learned lines and dances, and they were great. And I just happened to have a picture from yesterday, and you can see them. They did the most amazing job, and their smiles and enthusiasm were terrific. And I also read that, I think it was 1974, there was a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat that was done here. So 74 to 24. I don't think we should wait that long for the next one, right? Abby? No, next year. It was just absolutely delightful. Okay, and then there's this is a picture of all the combined choirs over the years, from 75 on up to 2022. They just keep growing, and aren't we blessed to have these young voices adding their energy and their enthusiasm to our worship services. Under Pastor Grove's ministry from 67 to 72, a contemporary early service was added and held in Fellowship Hall for families who preferred the less formal type of service. Even with the new large sanctuary seating of more than 400, the church was committed to 2 services, and this early hour served a purpose. When the worship schedule expanded to 3 services in 1993, Fellowship Singers was organized. And there's a picture of Fellowship Singers. And they did the early service in Fellowship Hall. And then again, do you see anyone you know? Like I found Ed Eastman, maybe a Skip Sponsel, Barbara Kemp. I think Jeff Kemp might be in that picture. And perhaps you were in that group. Anybody else that's here that was in that group? Who? Patty. All right. Anyway, from 1993 to 2003, Mary Kidd directed the group and the high school youth choir, the Grace Singers, and was also director of music. In 2003, Ken Hickman was hired as director of contemporary music at the early and 9:30 services. And he was followed by Tori Cummings, then Jared Jensen. And from 2012 to 2020, Judy Middlestat led the 8 a.m. service. There was no longer a choir that sang. Instead, Judy brought in small groups and soloists to add to her heartfelt, Lord-worshiping hymn playing. And then there was COVID. In 2022, Joe Sanchez was brought on to provide the music for the 8 a.m. blended and modern worship services, the latter now, as we know, running concurrently with a 9:30 traditional service. Joe, a talented musician who plays a variety of musical instruments, has added his distinctive style to both of these services. And let's not forget about the accomplished Covenant Bell Choir. Their remarkable group began in the spring of 1979 when Dr. Michael and Pat Nichols attended an English handbell concert in Portland, and then they began to have a dream of having a handbell choir complement the music program at the church. They donated the first 2 octaves of handbells, and Pat Noel agreed to be the first director. The first group of ringers was recruited, and they participated in workshops on bell technique and 2 months of rehearsal. The new bell choir rang at the church for the first time on November 7th, 1979, and have been ringing ever since. In fact, Pat Nichols, who's sitting right here, was in that first bell choir. And I'm not going to have you stand up, but you can wave your hand. Yay. I have to see what my timing is like. I'm going to be over, so I better speed things up or stop giving all the asides. Okay, in 1989, Leanne Billstrom began directing and remained in that position until last December when she retired after 34 years of dedicated service. And now we're blessed to have Aaron Waite as the new director. The Covenant Bells have participated in area festivals that brought together 200 ringers from Oregon, Washington, Montana, Alaska, and Idaho. While the Western National Festivals conferences brought together 300 to 400 ringers from states west of the Mississippi. In 1999, the Covenant Bells traveled to Germany and the Czech Republic to participate in Saxon Bohemian Music Festival. In 2003, our bell choir joined other American ringers for the first European Handbell Festival. Playing with a choir of 99 ringers in a centuries-old cathedral was a most memorable experience for all. Our ringers are multi-talented. Oh, I forgot to put the picture up of bells. Oops. There's the original bell choir. Did I have that up before? Well, there it is. Okay. Because, anyway, they're talented. Some have 2 bells but play 4 notes in their hands at once. I don't know how they keep them straight. And who can miss Jim Troisi or Glenn Haskell lifting that huge bell, which Glenn thinks weighs about 13 pounds in the loft? In 2000, Leanne Billstrom met Dave Bamonte, who, as we know, plays the trumpet for the Oregon Symphony and still does, and together they decided to hold a concert at Christmas that combined the bells from the church and the brass players from the Oregon Symphony, and of course, bells and brass began, and it's going on today. It's a combination of carols and secular Christmas songs. For years, our own Bill Shonley narrated the concert, his voice adding richness and depth to both the nativity passages and the poems, including "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And what would our music be today if we didn't have our magnificent pipe organ? Both for its sound and its beauty, it is a work of art. Which leads me to the next session of our program, which is the visual arts. Pipe organs have been leading congregational song for centuries. Their pure and sustained tone supports the human voice, and the range of available colors, like the gentle strings, the flute stops, to the majestic trumpets and tubas, can help to bring the text of our hymns to life. But we didn't always have this exquisite work of art that is the pipe organ today. Here's an interesting fact, noted by Alberta Fogdahl again, who said that even before the church had its own building, there was an organ. In the minutes from a director's meeting at the community house, she mentions that the kids from Sunday school could sing with the organ. Church member Edith Zimmerman recalled that one of the very first organs was operated on compressed air, received from manually operated bellows behind the organ. And can you imagine having that job? They're playing the organ, you're doing this, getting the air through, right? The first organ in the newly built church was played by Alma Simonton, and it was dedicated at a service in 1930. It might have been the one used in the Sunday school, but it's equally possible. I thought this was interesting. It was an organ bought at a bargain price from an Oregon City church, and it was used for 2 years before it wore out. That's what happens when you get a bargain price on an organ. At one point, there was an Esty organ, but in December of 1946 newsletter, the desire to buy a Hammond to replace the Esty was expressed. Nothing happened until 1947, when the trustees recorded the need for a better organ. Discussion continued, and in May of 1953, I say Presbyterians take a long, long, long time to make up their minds. The trustees promised to buy the organ, which they did, and it might have looked something like what I have up here. To honor the new organ, a special concert was given in April of that year, and Reverend Tolson was the soloist to a crowd that filled the sanctuary and overflowed into the fireside room, which is now our courtyard room. Later, the Hammond was replaced by a two-manual, 24-rank Balcom and Vaughan pipe organ. It cost $41,400. The pipe organ didn't damage the appearance of the chancel, as the pipes were installed in the space above the white screens in the center where the speakers from the Hammond were located, and that organ was finally installed and dedicated in 1976. There were a variety of organists who played over the years, but Elsie Wetchell played for 16 of them from 1962 to 1978. Her leadership in ministry brought joy to the congregation, and her love of music and eagerness to share her gift enriched the congregational worship. In 1980, Mitch Groh was hired as our organist and served well until his untimely death in 2012. Beverly Cipher filled in until Jeff Wood was hired in 2014, and he has continued the strong tradition of organ music here and makes use of the fine tuned instrument we now have, leading our hymns on Sunday and showcasing the organ through concerts and hymn festivals. Yay! And his postludes now keep us in our seats until the last note has been played. If you notice, so many people stay, because who can leave when his music fills the sanctuary with such vibrant and rich sounds? Okay. What am I on? Okay, the pipe organ. Yeah. Ta-da! Okay. During the 2008 sanctuary remodel, it was decided to take that opportunity to renovate the organ as well, and Bond Organ Builders of Portland was hired to take on this task. And all the pipes were removed, cleaned, and revoiced. Roberta Bond, who has just passed away earlier that year, designed the beautiful facade that would become a focal point of this renovated space. And as you enter the sanctuary, of course, your eyes are drawn to the pipes, but they're also drawn to the cross above. And the burnished pipes you see aren't for show. All of them except one are connected to the bellows and play some of the lowest notes that you hear from the organ. Along with all the pipes in the back that you can't see, there are 1,640 pipes in the organ. One part of the organ that wasn't touched during the remodel was the console. And most of us remember that console was kind of over here, stationary, under the floor, kind of. Well, it was decided that needed to be moved, changed too. So, because that fixed position made it very difficult sometimes for Wendy and Jeff to communicate. And there were other issues too. So a committee was formed, and this one didn't take like 10 years to figure it out. And funds were raised to build a new console designed by Bond Organ, and with consultation with Jeff, and installed in 2016. The new console, as you can see, is movable. There it is, adding flexibility for big Sundays and concerts, and is itself a work of art. Be sure to take a closer look after I talk today, and Jeff said he'll stick around if you have any questions. What other works of art do we have in this building? Well, how many of you just come in the main door of the church to go to meetings or dinners or other events happening and hardly notice the painting that graces the wall as you enter? It's easy to do. Blakely Dadson, who grew up in the church, created this symbolic work 25 years ago. He was only 20 at the time and was in his first year at California College of Arts in Oakland. He began selling some of his paintings he created there. Chancel Guild saw it and purchased it for our church. If you take a closer look, you'll see he not only used paint, and do this on the way out, he used fabric as in that painting if you get up close. It reflects Genesis, in the beginning, the darkness and the light, God represented by the golden sphere, the red line. Can you see the red line just barely there? Between represents Christ. And now, photography. How many of you have walked the hall upstairs between the hub room and the youth room? Okay, that's good, but the rest of you should do it. Why? Because if you haven't, you're missing out on the International Partnerships Photo Gallery. There we go. How fortunate we are to have fine photographers like Rick Simpson, Jeff Kemp, Kevin Cummings, and others who have captured these images. Those are two of them for our partnerships. And as a aside, Sherry Brown, who was Pastor Greg's assistant for years and years, framed every single one of those. And that's an art unto itself. So go take a look. Look at the faces of the people God loves and has connected with our Lake Grove family. This is a familiar sight, the Jesus statue, sculpture that's out in the courtyard over here. And if you're, I know many of you are familiar with it, but you may not know how it came to be there. It was commissioned in memory of Michael Grimm, Amy and Bill Grimm's 5-year-old son, who died suddenly, and also for a woman named Bobby Chen Lesson, a faithful, long-term member of the church. It was dedicated on January 8th. Chris Miklusek, the sculptor, was particularly touched by the subject and the meaning of the statue. Her feelings are captured in the expressions on the faces and the positioning of the arms and the strengths of the figures. As Pastor Bob noted at the time of the dedication, the statue does not simply represent Jesus' love for children, but his love for all of us as children of God. And just as an aside, there's so much more information on that and also on the next thing I'm talking about, but I didn't include it in your packets. I'll have extra copies of just that backstory information, or I'd be here until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Okay, the next piece of art is an intarsia. You say, intarsia, what does that mean? Well, the woodwork mosaic wall in the entrance of the children's wing is made out of small pieces of different colored wood to create a design, and that's what an intarsia is. It depicts Noah, his ark, and many animals to vividly tell the Bible story. It's 16 feet long, 7 feet high, and made out of more than 30 different kinds of wood. And when I came to take a picture, and I came several times, there were children's things all underneath it. So I just did the detail, right? But if you've never seen it, you should go over there because they encourage you to touch it and feel it, and you would not believe the detail that was involved in that. It was created by the inmates at Oregon State Correctional Institution during a work-based skill training program. And there is a wonderful backstory to that, and how Diane Savage actually saw some of their work at a different facility and went and talked to them. So if you want to know more about that, I have a handout on that also. It was hung in the church in June of 2001 and is in memory of Rocky and Luann Johnson's beloved son, Kevin. And here are the details. So you can see pictures of that, and there's some more. Every one of those things, it's not paint, it's all wood, different colors, and raised. It's absolutely amazing. So make sure you head over there today or sometime soon. I know that in the last Dig Deeper session, Don Titterington mentioned the stained glass window from the original building that is hanging in the narthex, but it's still worth noting here. It was lovingly restored by Tom Moore. Yep. I love how the sunlight deepens those beautiful purple colors. Here we go. If you notice this picture that's always out here as you come in and you pick up your bulletins, that was done by Elaine Hoffman. She was a well-known artist here and nationally, and we're privileged to have one of her original works hanging at the church. And then there's the baptismal font. Glenn Chilcote designed this and hired a local company to create it, and I just think it's absolutely exquisite. If you really look at it, especially beautiful. It would be especially beautiful if it were sitting over there and the sun was coming through the anyway, the windows. That makes, like this picture, all right? It just highlights it, and I think it's an exquisite piece. It's also a beautiful because of its purpose. The crosses in the church, how many do you see? Where are they? In the windows of the sanctuary and fellowship hall? Where else? They're a constant reminder of why we are here, the sacrifice Jesus made for us. And I need to see, can I talk for 5 more minutes? Okay. Just the people in the choir know, but on an evening service when we're singing, the reflection, when that cross is lit, it reflects back right in the center of what's in that back window. It's very, very moving. Okay. This cross I'm wearing is a piece of art, and it has a story. It was handmade by Vince Tillman, who made wooden crosses for those going on mission trips. But there is a backstory to that one, too. In 2012, Doug Oliphant called Vince and asked if he could craft a small wooden cross he could wear around his neck. Doug had been battling bone cancer for several years and said the Lord had told him he should wear a cross over his heart. Vince agreed, and the next morning, he presented him with the cross. A few days later, Doug called Vince again to make 30 crosses for his Bible study fellowship. And Vince, a week later, got the crosses to him. And then Doug called Vince to meet him at Starbucks the next day to present one of the crosses to a mutual friend and fellow cancer sufferer, Bob, who was very moved when he received the cross. About a week later, Bob called and said he had a conversation with a man who was walking his wheelchair-bound wife at a mall and learned she only had months to live. So Bob was so moved he gave his cross to her. He told her of his purpose. His purpose was to remind her on a daily basis that the Lord was always with her. And then Bob called to ask if his cross could be replaced. Of course it was. Hence, the Everyday Cross Ministry was born. Since then, over 4,000 crosses have been given away to people here and all over the world. And I know when you're on a mission trip, there isn't one of us who didn't give our crosses to someone who we knew needed the Lord right by their hearts. Yeah.
This is an original Doug Oliphant.
Okay, again, I did not plant the man here. He has an original. There were varied sizes of the crosses, varied woods that he used. There was big ones, and there was one with multicolor on it. And, you know, Vince is not doing well now, so this is a ministry that is, I think, even more dear to our hearts. Okay, you probably saw several banners hanging in the gathering area as you walked in today, and then the one in Fellowship Hall. And some of you remember a time where we saw them at many of the different services. There's a backstory here, too. The backstories are the most interesting thing, I think. It began in 1970 when Chancel Guild was established to prepare elements for communion and to use color and design to enhance worship services and provide floral arrangements to welcome the congregation. As an aside here, Kathy Johnson, sitting right here in this beautiful turquoise blouse, provides almost all our flowers since COVID. Again, another form of the visual arts. I think if we really think about it, visual arts expand much more than just, I'm going to go to the museum and look at a painting. Okay. In 1974, John Harlan, who was the pastor at the time, asked Chancel Guild to create 5 banners for the sanctuary to demonstrate a series of sermons he wished to give. And that was the beginning of a program that would compile a permanent collection of banners for the church. When Fellowship Hall was completed in 1991, a communion banner was created for the service, followed by many others. In all, there were more than 30 banners in the collection, all designed and handmade by members of the Chancel Guild. And in this picture, you can see Susie Downey. Is she here today? Oh, I wish she were. Anyway, Susie Downey, working on the 75th anniversary banner. The design was based on the stained glass window from the original church building. Next is a banner, a Pentecost banner that was done by Jane Vandervelde with the flames coming up. And just take the time, they'll only be up this weekend, take the time to look at the absolute amazing stitchery that went into these. And finally, the Praise Hymn banner from Jane, also from Jane Vandervelde. And here's what she had to say about her creation, and I'm almost done. It depicts communication between God and his people. It examines music and sound as language to express our love for God. None of the instruments is complete, and they do not appear in proportion to one another to create visually a cacophony of sound. We all praise God differently. We emphasize different sounds, instruments, and meter. A cross is placed subtly in the upper right-hand corner to indicate to whom this communication is directed. The bands of color dissecting the piece creates the impression of a conduit. Praise is truly a dialogue between the creator and the created. The creation of sound, music, and expression of the heart are the components of that praise. Art and music, expressions of Christ's love. And so we end our 100 years of music and art sitting in this magnificent sanctuary, surrounded by beauty everywhere. And I think it's only fitting that since we began with music, that we end with music, and I'd like you to join me. I think you'll recognize the melody from the hymn, "When in our music God is glorified," and the words are on your handout, right on that very last page, right down here. So if you would join me, Jeff, Will, here we go. Let every instrument be tuned to praise. Let all rejoice who have a voice to raise. And may God's leave us faith to sing always. Alleluia. Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. Thank you. That's good. Thank you. And if you want any of the extra handouts, I'll put them right up here on the chancel. Thank you.